very common electrical project that a lot of DIYers and homeowners take on themselves is adding lighting outside, especially like floodlights, whether it's motion activated, or in this case, I'm gonna be installing a smart floodlight for downlighting, or there are also floodlights that have cameras in them. Whatever the case may be, this is a very common project where a lot goes wrong. So in this video, I'm gonna go over what those very common mistakes are that a ton of homeowners and DIYers are making, and some electricians, and I'm gonna show you step by step how I go about installing lighting, and more particular in this case, outdoor lighting, as there are some other nuances that a lot of people aren't aware of. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so this right here is the current floodlight that I'm gonna be replacing. This one has motion activation on it. I no longer need that. I just want a light that I can control with my phone, but the instructions will be the exact same whether or not you're wanting motion activation or going to a light that does not require it. So I'll be going from this current floodlight here to this one here, which has a bunch of LEDs in them. And with this, I'll be able to control the color temperature just by using my phone. All right, so now I'm ready to start with the replacement of this floodlight. But the first thing that we always want to do before we're doing anything with electrical is we want to make sure that the power is off to this. So at the very least, I want to make sure that my light switch is off, but a safer option would be to go to the circuit breaker panel and actually turn off the circuit breaker that supplies power to this light. All right, so now that the power is off going to this, now I can just move this light down and out of the way, and I need to get to, there's a screw in this hole right here. I just need to loosen that up, pull this light down, and then I'm going to be able to test to make sure that the power is in fact off. And now that the box is exposed, now I'm going to take my non-contact voltage detector, and I want to make sure that I've got no power in this box. If there is power, this light will turn to red, and it'll also make an audible beep or alarm sound. So I'm just going to put it all around all of those wires up in the box, really get it in there, and I have no power up in my box. So I have confirmed that the power is in fact off, and I can start working on this. All right, so first thing I want to do then is just pull all of my wire connections out of the box so that they're exposed so I can work on them. And now that that's removed, I've already spotted my first mistake that was made when installing this, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. All right, so now that I've got everything exposed here, the power is off, I'm gonna go ahead and remove my wire nuts to remove this old floodlight. All right, so now I've got all of my wiring exposed here. The light is removed. I kind of cut some of the soffit away so you can see just a little bit better. But in this case, I do have a junction box up in here. That is the proper way for this to be mounted and installed. You have to have a junction box available for the wiring to go in where your connections are in order for it to meet code and also not be a safety issue. So this is the first thing that a lot of times when I'm doing renovations on homes, I find it more so in walls than I do in soffits or ceilings, but I have seen it here as well where there is no junction box available with the previous install. But in this case, we do have that, which is great. If you do not, what you would want to do then is just cut out your soffit or your siding to the size of the junction box that you're going to be installing. A lot of times if I'm doing lighting especially, I'll just use a pancake box, which is a very thin box that then gets mounted to usually plywood or whatever you have as a substrate underneath of your soffit or siding. Then once it's all cut out, you just take that box, screw it in, and you're good to go as far as code and safety goes. They also do make boxes that are quite a bit thicker that can just flush mount to whatever it is that you're installing it on. Just keep in mind they would be sticking out about that far or the depth of the box, but it is an easier install. All right, so as you can see, now I have all of my wires separated. I have a set of black hot wires, a set of ground wires, and a set of white neutral wires. And I like to have them all separated out and prepared for the actual install. All right, so normally at this point is when we could start just installing our new wires and light fixture. However, I mentioned earlier that there was a mistake that was made on the previous install that I want to get into now. And I also want to quickly talk about our splices and connection points here. All right, so the incredibly common mistake that's made when doing these types of installs comes down to our grounds. And if any of you caught it, when I took that initial light fixture down, you may have seen where we have this green ground screw right here. This is for our mounting bracket. And if your box doesn't have one already, you'll need to install one for your new light fixture. Most of the time, light fixtures are gonna come with one if you don't already have one in there. So that will just need to be installed with a screw screw on each side of the box. But getting back to this green ground screw, there was nothing underneath it. There was no ground wire attached to it, and that is very important, especially if this was going to be a metal electrical box, or if you're installing one of those flush mount junction boxes. Most of the time those are made of metal. If you see a green ground screw on your installs, you need to be utilizing it. It's there for a reason. Luckily though, before we get into any of our wiring, this is a very simple thing to correct and make sure that we get done correctly. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen that green ground screw. It doesn't need to come out very much, just enough for a wire to go underneath of it. We've got our 2 copper ground wires here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my incoming ground wire and I'm just going to wrap it up underneath and around that green ground screw in a clockwise direction. So once that's wrapped around there, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten it down. All right, so it's that easy. You don't necessarily have to do any pigtails. As long as you got enough ground wire to wrap around it, which you should, it's just that easy to put one of them up underneath of there and secure it. So now this box and the fixture itself will be protected in the event of a ground fault. That's why it's so important. Because if one of these conductors comes loose in that box, makes contact with the light fixture itself, now if it makes contact with anything, whether it's a metal box, the light fixture itself, or this bracket, we're going to know because it's going to send return current on the ground wire back to the panel and it's going to trip that circuit breaker. So very important, incredibly common to find them like this, and for DIYers especially to make that mistake. I've seen a lot of electricians do it as well, but always make sure that that ground screw is utilized. All right, so now let's talk about our splices or our connections that we're about to make, because this is very important, like I mentioned earlier, and there's just a few ways that you can go about doing this. Most people are familiar with wire nuts, and there's nothing wrong with wire nuts as long as they are installed properly and you're using a quality wire nut. Most of your light fixtures are going to come with these little orange wire nuts. These are incredibly cheaply made. I really don't like them. I call them crappy wire nuts, and so I just personally really don't recommend using these. If you're going to use a wire nut, which again is totally okay, and as long as it's installed properly, it's hard to argue against it being one of the best connections you can make. I would highly recommend picking up a bag of 3M Performance Plus wire nuts. You really can't go wrong with buying some Ideal wire nuts. They are probably the biggest name in the game. I wouldn't just go with the cheapest bag of them. I'd probably opt for a little bit more moderately priced bag. They're really not that much more expensive. But what I recommend for most DIYers are these right here. These are called Wagos. This is their inline connector, which I really like, especially for lighting situations. The way that they work is they've got these levers up here on top where you just flip the lever up like so. You insert your wire in. You can verify on the bottom that the wire is all the way up where it needs to be because of that clear plastic, and then you just flip that lever down and the wire will be locked into place. And with these inline connectors, you would then just do it on the other side, and it's basically like a crimp splice how they're in line. However, as you can see, I've already got a set of wires for each one of my wires here. 2 hots, 2 grounds, and 2 neutrals. So I will not be able to use the inline connector. In this case, since I've got 2 there, I'm going to be adding a wire of each color for my light fixture. So for this install, I'm going to be using this 3-port Wago, and it works the exact same way as the inline. But like always, for your convenience, I'll have links for both of these options. Assortment packs is what I really recommend because you get the biggest bang for your buck, and you get a lot of the times inlines and your regular Wagos, 2, 3, and 5 ports. I'll have links for everything you see in this video down in the description down below, so when you click on those links, it will take you directly to whatever you clicked on so you can check them all out for yourself. Alrighty, so now I'm ready to install my new smart LED light fixture. Just as kind of a bonus tip, what I already did was I put my Wagos or connected them already to my stranded light fixture wires. When you're working overhead, by pre-installing these on the light fixture, it's going to make hanging it a lot easier. And that's something you can do with these Wagos, but you really can't do with wire nuts. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my bare copper ground wires here. I'm going to go ahead and flip the 2 levers up on my Wago connector, so I'm ready to insert them in. Then all I need to do is take one of those ground wires, push it up into the Wago connector. At this point, I always like to flip it upside down regardless of what wire I'm installing, and you can see through that clear plastic exactly what's going on. My wire is seated all the way at the top. I have plenty of copper, especially in this case since it's a bare copper wire, underneath of that bus bar. So then once I've verified that, all I have to do then is flip that lever down, and now my wire is locked into place. So then I will do the same thing with the last remaining ground wire, put it into that next input, verify it's seated, flip the lever down, and now all of my ground wires are connected together with this Wago lever nut. So now I can push those up and into the box and out of the way. Now, something I didn't touch on when I was talking about how I have 2 of each wire, the reason I have 2 of each wire is because not only do I have power coming in, but I have power being fed to other lights on this circuit. So if you ever see that, that's the reason why it's powering something else. Whereas if you just have 1 set of each wire, so 1 black, 1 white, and 1 copper, it means you only have power going to this particular box, or it's the last one in line. All right, so now I'm gonna do the same thing with my white neutral wires. I already got my light fixture connected in that Wago, flip those 2 other levers up, and then just like the ground wire, insert 1 of the neutral wires into one of the ports, flip it upside down, make sure it's seated, and we've got nice copper underneath of that bus bar. Flip that lever down, now it's locked into place. Take the last remaining white neutral wire, push it up in that last port, flip down that lever, and now my neutrals are connected. So now I can push those up and out of the way into the junction box. So last but definitely not least, we have our black hot wires. I'm going to do the exact same steps that I did with the ground and the neutral wires, inserting them into those ports, verifying that they're seated correctly, and flipping the levers down. And so now those can be pushed up into the box and out of the way. All right, so now all the wires are spliced together, everything is hooked up. So now this is where we can start actually mounting the light fixture. Now before we go and do that, this brings us to our 3rd big and common mistake that comes when installing these outdoor light fixtures. And that's if we flip this up to the bottom side, you will see that this is all just plastic all the way around here. Well, what a lot of people don't realize is, especially since we're outdoors, this is being exposed to the elements. My light is installed enough under the eave to where it won't be a huge issue, especially with my gutters out in front here. It's still very important, and especially if you're mounting this on a wall or closer to the edge of the eave, you need to weatherproof this. Now, why these do not come with the weatherproofing already on them, I don't know. A lot of times, and like in this case, they will come with the gasket that needs to be installed in order to do this, but this is a big step that a lot of people miss when they're installing this. You do not want any moisture getting into those boxes. Again, if it's cascading down your wall, gets into your box, it's gonna cause you a bunch of issues. So you're gonna wanna get you some adhesive gasket material like this here, if yours does not come with one. In this case, this did come with this particular light fixture. Now, the reason I'm doing this step now is just for purposes of this video, so that when we got to this step, I could highlight it. But preferably before you splice up your wires, you wanna already have this gasket installed on the base with your wires running through the center. But in this case, or if for whatever reason you just forget to do so, it's not a huge deal. We can just go ahead and break or tear that gasket in one place, just like so. And then we'll just take that gasket and work our way all the way around the perimeter of the base of the light fixture. So just like that, and now we have a nice weather tight seal that's going to be provided when we go to tighten this down. It's going to press up against whatever it is that we're installing this on, and it's going to provide that nice weather tight seal. All right, so now we're ready to tighten down and mount our light fixture. So as we're doing this, we just want to go ahead, push the wiring up into the box so that it's not exposed or coming out of the edges when this is tightened down, like so. And then we can take our bolt, and it's going to be supplied with your light fixture, and that bolt is going to go up in that hole right in the center, just like we had with our previous light fixture. So just insert that in, get it all lined up the way that you want it, and then use your screwdriver to tighten it down. And if you notice any wires pop out as you're doing this, you definitely want to make sure you get them tucked back in and up into the box. Then at this point, I just need to adjust my lights the way that I particularly want them. Most of these lights will have screws on each side of the swivels for each one of the lights, that once you adjust it to where you want it, you just take a screwdriver and then tighten it down, and then it will lock them into place. All right, so now it's at this point, the light is installed. Now I can go to the circuit breaker or the light switch, turn them on. So as you can see, my power is back on. The light is flashing. For this particular light, that's what it does when it's trying to sync everything flashing up because this is a smart light. But if you just had a standard light or motion detection light, it would probably just turn on for a split second or for a limited amount of time and then turn off. But this is probably not going to stop doing this until I configure all of the settings. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off so it's not constantly flashing. So as you saw, super easy install, lots of features, some very important things to look out for as far as code compliance and safety, steps that really need to be followed that oftentimes get missed. And then once all that's done, you're left with a very nice looking light that can completely change the feel of the outside, especially at nighttime. And like I mentioned earlier, with all the features of this particular light, such as its smart capabilities, where I'm able to turn it on and off using my phone or tablet or whatever devices can connect to this. And I'm also able to control the color temperature, which is a big deal when you're trying to match up, especially existing lights that are already in the area. Or if you're just wanting it to be as bright as possible, the brightness can be adjusted as well. Either way, I'll have links for this floodlight, that Eufy camera floodlight, and some other standard motion detection floodlights that I've used in the past that I think work really, really well. I'll have links for all of those, along with all of the tools used and all of the connectors that we used and talked about in this video. I'll have links for everything down in the description down below. When you click on those links, it will take you directly to whatever you clicked on, so you can check it all out for yourself. Now, really quickly before you go, if you found value in this video, then you'll definitely find value in some videos that I did in the past. One that I think you'd be particularly interested in is we talked about those connections or those connection points and splicing devices. I've got some videos where I go over some of the most common mistakes that are made when connecting wires together, and that includes wire nuts and the WAGOs that I showed you in this video. There are some common mistakes, things to look out for, what those common mistakes could possibly cause, some very dangerous situations, and then ultimately how they should be installed. So that's one option. If that's not of interest to you, I also have another video that's very closely related to this, where I install some outdoor light fixtures that aren't just light fixtures, but they also have GFCI receptacles already built into them. So you can add some outlets on the outside of your home without any additional wiring other than just wiring up and installing those light fixtures. So whichever one of those interests you the most, all you have to do is click on one of these two videos right over here, and it'll take you directly to whichever one you pick. But I hope that you found value in this video, and if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.